They're the great minds behind Microsoft, Google, CNN and Bloomberg. They're industrial titans, oil tycoons, venture capitalists and inventors. But amongst the mega-rich, there's a new generation of philanthropists keen to apply their business minds to tackle the planet's problems.
From a very selfish point of view, there's nothing I can do with my money that would give me as much pleasure as maybe curing a disease or educating kids.
This wealth, we've chosen not to pass it to our children or, buy all sorts of mansions or whatever. We're getting it back to society in the way that can have the most positive impact.
Their goals are eradicating disease, ending poverty, improving education and combating climate change. And they have no qualms about bypassing charities and governments in order to achieve success.
I am an optimist. Any tough problem, I think it can be solved.
So if your goal is really to change the world, you've already, you don't have that much competition.
This is the story of the fifth golden age of philanthropy, where money and ideals merge in the quest to do good. In this series, we'll explore the new landscape of billionaire philanthropists. What drives them to pioneer new approaches to issues that were previously the domain of nation-states? Can the extremely wealthy save the world? And should we leave them to it? In 2006, at a press conference in New York, the then second richest man in the world stood on stage and did an extraordinary thing. Warren Buffett, chief executive of conglomerate Berkshire Hathaway, announced he was giving away almost all of his fortune.
When you've got billions of people who've been dealt a terrible hand in life around the world, with really hundreds of millions with health problems of one sort or another that in a great many cases could be prevented, that is not something that $3 billion a year is too much money for.
At an estimated $37 billion, it was the largest philanthropic donation to date. And most of it, he told the crowd, would go to a foundation run by the then richest man in the world, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates.
So you're seeing the three trustees of the foundation here, and we're going to do our best job to have as much impact as possible.
One journalist who was in the room that day is Matthew Bishop. He's now a leading commentator on philanthropy.
And you basically had this moment in history which was, I think, unique, of the two most successful businessmen of any time, but certainly this time, pledging to give away most of their money to help the poorest people on the planet.
Just days before Buffett handed over his fortune, Bill Gates made a big announcement of his own.
In July, I'll make a big career change. I'm learning how to give money away.
The college dropout who became a billionaire by the age of 31 made headlines around the world when he decided to leave his job at Microsoft to work full-time on helping those less fortunate. And he's kept to his word. At Ideas Fest TED 2010, his title simply read, Philanthropist. To date, the Gates Foundation's directed more than $21 billion to good causes.
My name is Felix.
My name is Isaac.
My name is Anton.
My name is Rosemary Vanjiro.
When we started our foundation, we agreed that the basic principle driving our priorities should be a belief that all lives have equal value, that every person deserves a chance to live a healthy and productive life.
History shows those with self-made fortunes are more generous with wealth than others who inherited bags of gold. By deciding to give away their fortunes within their lifetimes, both Buffett and Gates drew inspiration from a man who'd chosen the same path more than a century before. His name was Andrew Carnegie, and he had very strong views on how the rich should spend their fortunes. The steel baron built 3,000 public libraries in his lifetime and penned the renowned Gospel of Wealth, arguing the rich are merely trustees of wealth and have a moral obligation to distribute it to the common man.
The public verdict will then be the man who dies thus rich dies disgraced.
Those words have rung in the ears of many of the world's wealthy ever since. Reclusive Irish-American billionaire Chuck Feeney showed copies of Carnegie's prose to his children to explain why most of their inheritance would go to education and health research.
I like the thrill of the chase, but once you've done it and you've got money, there's got to be something you can do better with that money than unfortunately what's done by many people.
New York billionaire, now mayor, Michael Bloomberg feels giving is part of his ancestry and has donated hundreds of millions to health and social services.
Private philanthropy is a very American tradition, and it's one of the things that I think lets America hold its head up and sort of say we're better than everybody else. I really believe that.
But Americans weren't the first philanthropists. Bishop and author Michael Green have researched 5 golden ages of philanthropy, dating back to the 16th century.
We actually went back and dug into the history of philanthropy. And it's really striking that sort of philanthropy emerges in the Renaissance at the same time as capitalism emerges. Because much of the sort of the church religious philanthropy of the Middle Ages was very much this expressive giving. It was there as a religious duty.
But religious and civil wars devastated Europe in the 17th century, setting back the development of capitalism and with it, philanthropy. It wasn't until peace and stability returned that a second era of philanthropy emerged. Capitalists could pool their resources and meet the needs of a growing society, funding things like hospitals. According to Bishop and Green, the Third Age grew during the industrialisation of the Victorian era. In the 19th century, philanthropy became a way of life for Britain's newly wealthy. As British philanthropy waned, a fourth era dawned across the Atlantic. The US economy rapidly grew, and so did the wealth of industrialists like Carnegie. It was during this time the world's first billionaire was made. His name was John D. Rockefeller, and he made his fortune from oil.
Rockefeller is most famous for funding the Green Revolution, which was about producing agricultural productivity in Latin America and Asia, which is reckoned by most people to have saved 1 billion lives over the last 40 years.
The next generation of prominent philanthropists lay dormant for decades. That was until 1997, when a man named Ted Turner, the creator of CNN and Rolling News, made a rash decision before stepping on stage at a United Nations dinner. He announced he was giving $1 billion to the international organisation.
January the 1st, I was worth $2.2 billion. And August 31st, I was worth $3.2 billion. So all I'm giving away with this $1 billion is my 9 months' earnings. It's not even a full year's work. Who cares?
He did that in the late 1990s. And really he came up with that idea because he had to give a speech to the United Nations and he hadn't got anything controversial to say, so he thought this would make news headlines, which seems to be very much his personality. And he then badmouthed a number of the other billionaires who weren't giving any money and said it's about time they stepped up and opened their wallets.
And they did. Welcome to the 5th golden age of philanthropy. In the 21st century, Buffett and Gates are role models for mega giving, not only inspiring the wealthy to share, but using the principles of business to maximise the impact donations have.
We can measure the impact. We can see if the vaccines are really getting out to those children. We can make sure that the resources are not being taken away from the desired impact.